tell you I'm Ashland born and bred. Go Grizz. My folks still live there. My kid brother.
I will actually have to sign off early today because I have an in-person in Ashland at 5:30 and I have to account for the traffic.
Hysterical. My dad was like, "There's terrible traffic on the way to the airport." I'm like, "Do you mean there were other cars on the road? Is that what you mean by traffic in Southern Oregon?" You coming from K Falls though, that part where they shut down the road right by the lake, that's bad. That's legit traffic.
It's better now. It's cleared. Last time I went through, it's completed as far as that project goes. They might do more, but that bottleneck has been cleared.
Bless. Welcome, Lucinda. Hi, Jody. Hi, Lydia. Welcome, everybody. Hi, Marcus. Hi, Nate. God, I'm terrified I'm gonna
Hi,
forget
thank you.
somebody. If I've forgotten you, it's not personal. I'm so glad you're here.
January 20.
All right. I think we have a critical mass. Madeline, you think we're ready to roll? All right, everybody. Welcome to meeting number 5 of the Factory Produced Housing Advisory Committee. We made it to meeting 5, y'all. It has been a sprint and a marathon over the last 6 weeks. You all have been a really extraordinary group to work with. We have gained so much wisdom and insight, so much respect for each of you and all that you're bringing to the field. It's just been a tremendous process, and it's only the first part of a much longer engagement, but it is the end of this initial sprint where we were gathering as much wisdom and feedback as we possibly could to help inform NOAA and OHCS as they construct the application process for these set-aside funds. I think we will go ahead and get started with just saying hey and sort of our usual housekeeping at the outset. We have a very rich meeting to go through today and are hoping against hope that we might even let people out a few minutes early. So again, hello, I'm Emily Evans. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a project director here at Echo Northwest. I'm joined by Madeline Miller and Taylor Burton from the Echo Northwest team. We also have the terrific team from NOAA, the Network for Oregon Affordable Housing, Communitest Planning, with Deb Meyhoff, and the terrific OHCS team who have been with us on this learning journey altogether. We would love to hear from everybody individually, and hopefully someday we can all gather and raise a glass to this tremendous effort we've been involved in. But to tide us over until then, if you could put your name, pronouns, organization, and your connection to Factory Produced Housing in the chat. We have heard folks request to have a roster of this committee shared, and we will do that for everybody. One of the kind of unexpectedly lovely things that has come out of this is a lot of community building. And that's been really wonderful, and we hope to continue to support that and as we sort of build the connective tissue of this field in Oregon. Thanks for adding things into the chat. I think we can keep going along. So today we're going to finish up our typical welcome and intros, our disclosures of conflicts and interest. We'll recap what we did at meeting 4. And then we will spend quite a bit of time doing some live polling related to the draft memo that we sent out that was meant to distill what I think ended up being about 25 hours worth of discussion, including the small groups and the survey and the whiteboards and all of the other rich ways that we've heard from you all throughout the last several weeks. Well, when we get to that poll, we'll connect with you all about how to do it. It should be fairly intuitive. You can do it from any device, but it will allow us to see in real time kind of where the group is landing on some of those summary pieces of the memo. Then we'll hear from OHCS about some of the logistical next steps in the process and for this group. And then we'll have sort of a rounded out discussion about the very tactical components of the application process and a proposal so that folks get a chance to weigh in on some of the nuts and bolts of that since we've been spending so much time on the big picture components. And then we'll sort of chat about what comes next for this group again at a more comfortable pace. But we're looking forward to continued learning for a year or more alongside one another. Anyone have questions or thoughts about agenda? Today's goals are to review the draft list criteria before the final recommendations. We'll say this, we said it once, we'll say it again. Today is really about kicking the tires on the synthesis that the project team has put together, and making sure that it's as accurate as we can get it, even if accuracy means we didn't quite land because the committee has a range of perspectives on a given component. And then to prepare everyone for the phase 2 meetings. I think we can go to the next one. All right, these are our public meeting law reminders. Behold, they're the same as they have been. Thank you for being mindful. For folks that are community members who are not members of the advisory committee, welcome. We are glad you're here. And because this is in a meeting style format instead of a webinar style format, we ask that you please stay in observation mode rather than participation mode, so that we can hear from the advisory committee. Thank you. And this is reminders for respectful communication. This has been such a generative and terrific group. I don't think folks need me to read them all aloud again, but just holding care for one another, holding care for the process, understanding that we might not necessarily all be aligned on each of these, but that everybody's coming with an open heart, and strong values alignment around wanting to see more affordable, accessible housing in Oregon. All right, now the conflict of interest show with Madeline.
Okay, thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. As we've been done on every meeting since, we're going to go through the conflicts of interest disclosures. As you know, OGEC has advised you are considered public officials in this advisory capacity to OCS, but due to the layered nature of your charge, you only have potential conflicts, not actual conflicts, which means they just need to be stated out loud verbally in each meeting, and then all members can proceed with discussions. So, we're going to do this now. You've heard it before. And there's two main categories. Let me get my list here. I'll go ahead and read it out. People on development teams who might apply for the factory produced housing set aside. Anna McCabe from Short Stack Housing, Ernesto Fonseca from Hacienda CDC, Gus Chachas from GCT Land Management, Jacob Fox from Homes for Good, Christy Willard from Housing Authority of Malheur and Harney County, Laura Bennett from the St. Vincent de Paul or Hope Factory, Lucinda Taylor, Habitat for Humanity of Lincoln County, Lydia Slocum from Northwest Housing Alternatives, Marge Caffarelli from Lit Homes, Mike Steffen from Walsh Construction, Nate Ember from Ink Built, Stuart Emmons from Emmons Design, Rita Haberman from the Department of Environmental Quality, and Stephanie Hooper from Age Plus. Is there anyone else who feels like they fall into this category with a disclosure of a potential conflict of interest? Hearing none. People who work for suppliers to firms who might apply for the factory produced housing set aside. Alex Connect from Pacific Wall Systems, David Qualls from Par Lumber, Kendra Cox from Blazer Homes, Nathan Young from Mods PDX, Stephen Zog from Zog Timber Solutions, or Tobias, again, I just didn't see who was here. Darren Gretchen from Green Canopy Node, and anyone else who wants to disclose a potential conflict of interest in this category. Marge? Okay, you fit into both.
Right,
Yeah.
we produce the housing.
Okay, great. Thank you. We can move on.
All right. Thanks, Madeline. I think we're at warp speed. I think it's the fastest we've ever done those. Good job, everybody. We really got it now. So reminding folks that in meetings 3 and 4, in meeting 3, we focused on the eligibility criteria, whether or not people could apply, as well as the readiness and viability of the projects, which folks did a great job drilling down into. And then in meeting 4, we discussed in between meeting 3 and 4, we had a survey, which was incredibly helpful and rich. Thank you to everybody who spent so much thoughtful time giving us their feedback on that, around the prioritization criteria and the portfolio balancing criteria. There were several components where we had a lot of good alignment there, and some that we still wanted some more thoughtful feedback on. We can go to the next slide, Madeline. So in meeting 4, we narrowed in, as we went over the survey responses as a group, And then we narrowed in on 4 kind of main things that we really were hoping to hear more discussion on. What constitutes innovation within this field, and what that means for the field and what that means vis-a-vis other priorities. Scalability and replicability for the field, what that means vis-a-vis innovation and other components that are prioritized. Materials and environmental impact, basically green sustainability, climate impacts, and what that means for the field, especially in terms of innovation and prioritization relative to other important policy priorities. And then finally, the geographic distribution of the projects, and what that means for portfolio balancing and what that means for particularly for rural parts of the state, and impact that that may have on other priorities. So we got some incredibly rich and thoughtful pieces of reflection there. Folks did 2, if you remember, 2 all the way back to to several days ago, and we got to choose 2 separate groups to participate in. That was incredibly helpful. And then we gathered all of the notes to date, the whiteboard, if you remember, the survey, the discussions, the various breakout groups, the emails, and conversations that we've had with other folks throughout the process. And Taylor and Deb and Madeline in particular did just yeoman's work of getting what was hours and hours of discussion and notes down to a single memo where we tried to capture where the group landed on these various components. I think we can go to the next slide now. Okay, so let's see if anybody has questions on kind of where we've been to date and what the intent of today is. Okay, and we are going to get into a little bit of a process where we read and review kind of the distillation of a particular criteria that fall in all 4 of those categories. And then we're going to do some live polling that demonstrates, kind of helps us take the temperature of the group on whether or not we got it. How close did we come to capturing what you feel is kind of the consensus of the group, or just where the group landed in general if there wasn't consensus? Now we understand that there is a, in the high 20s, low 30s number of people participating. There was incredible richness that we couldn't distill, capture all of in a synthesis like this. So we invite you to join us in the difficult process of getting all of that down to 1 to 3 sentence summary. So we'll have a 2-part question for each of the criteria. We'll go over them in time. I'll read it aloud and we'll put it up on the screen so folks can review it and have a bit of a think on it. And then we will go to the live polling where we will ask 2 questions. Number 1, does this capture to your mind where the group landed? And number 2, if it didn't, what would you invite us to change about the description of where the group landed? Understanding again that we have 30 some folks' opinions and that about 3 sentences to sum it up. So giving folks the ability to kind of how good do we get, how close did we get, and how would you get us closer if we didn't get close enough to your mind? Folks have questions about the process of like, this will be probably the next hour. Okay. I'm not sure if folks have done live polling before. The platform we use for this is called Vivox. So you can join it with the link that Madeline sent. You can join it with the QR code. What a comeback, right? For a QR code. That was a great comeback in the COVID era. Just things coming back around. So you can join it with the QR code, and you can join it at the URL there, the vivox.app. You can do it again. You can do it with your computer. You can do it with your phone. You can do it with your tablet. But go ahead and get into that. And then Taylor, are we good to do a little test poll to kind of test the drive out? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like people are already submitting answers. So
yes, I love it. Oh my God, is it contentious? What's happening? What did you go with?
not super contentious so far.
Okay, favorite movie snack. You did leave it open-ended. I thought there was gonna be forced choices, and then there would be a cold war between the Junior Mint people and the Raisinette people.
No, these are the options that are showing on screen. I think if I click show results, it'll show.
Oh, great. Okay.
Let's
Oh,
see.
all right. All right. All right. Popcorn by a country mile. I love it. Okay. Chocolate candy, fair, defensible. Sweet or sour. Love it.
Normally I wouldn't put those together, but I wanted to keep the options short here.
I mean, listen, you're a Sour Patch Kids kid, clearly. That I feel like sweet or sour candy, just the Sour Patch Kids are right there.
Yeah.
Nobody's going for nachos or cheese. I wonder if this was a sports event, if nachos cheese would be higher up, part of the vibe. Oh, no wings. All right. Okay. Wings are tough in a movie context. I'm not sure anybody wants to be sitting next to anybody eating wings in a movie theater. Then you're that guy.
You should have asked what's your favorite Zoom call snack, because some of
Yeah.
us bring an extra large popcorn to this.
Nice, smart, nice. We actually I mean, obviously we can't public meeting laws and so on, but wow, wouldn't it be great to just mail people Zoom meeting snacks?
I bring props, it's fine.
Love it. Okay, is anybody having trouble accessing the live polling via whichever avenue you choose? Taylor can help troubleshoot. We can help troubleshoot in real time. You can also drop it into the chat. This is not, this is not ride or die here. You can drop your feedback into the chat and we can gather it in the same way. Okay. Looks like we have 23 votes, so that seems like a good amount. Okay. I think if folks are just sort of generally ready to go, we can test this out with the real deal. So let's go ahead, Madeline, to the first of the eligibility criteria. Okay. So we have here that, oh man, I'm gonna have to get close. Eligibility criteria 1.1. And where we're landing is that we want to include the criteria as in terms of eligibility, but simplify it as much as possible. And the input of the group is the advisor committee understands the need to align this funding criteria with LIFT since it's nested within the LIFT program. The advisor committee had a strong desire to keep the factory produced housing criteria as simple as possible to avoid layering on too many policy priorities that come with the risk of impeding viability and feasibility. Some specific concerns were raised about the LIFT criteria, including the minimum size of units, the restrictiveness of the core development code regarding the number of units, and the limit of 60% AMI rather than 80% AMI. We'll give folks another few seconds to have a think on that or read it again.
I also popped a link to the PDF in a Google document into the chat. So if people didn't have it or want to pull it up on their own, they can look there as well.
Terrific. Okay. I think if folks are ready, we can go to the live polling. Popcorn is the answer. Popcorn is the answer to this one. So we'll ask folks here, does this accurately capture where the advisor committee landed in the project meets the baseline LIFT and OHCS requirements? So this is a choice between these 5 choices. We'll see where the group lands. And then if you have notes, if you have edits, if you have suggestions, we'll do that on the next page. I think it's so fun to watch it in real time. It's kind of like a video game. Looks like we're landing on, looks like a pretty healthy majority of folks in either agree or strongly agree, and some folks noting that they're neutral or that they don't think we quite nailed it. Let's see, hopefully we can get to 23 out of 23, and then we can ask folks what notes they might have on this. And we probably, just given time, won't read all the notes aloud, but we'll do the best we can, knowing that we have some number of these to get through.
Emily, do you want to invite folks to speak while we're doing polls, or do you just want to wait till we go to the next question?
Let's see how our cadence goes around this. Let's go ahead to the next question for now, and and then we'll see if we're waiting for folks, if as these things roll through, I can read them aloud, or we can invite folks to speak. All right. If we want to get closer, what all would you add to that synthesis?
There's no comments yet.
That's okay. Folks can take their time a bit. If folks want to come off mute and say, hey, you know what, let's think about this, or I really think we should include that, that's totally fine as well.
So you can hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
So obviously I have a issue with the core development manual, and that's why I pushed disagree. So I did a project with LIFT funding, and there was an ability to appeal some things. I don't know, not like a square footage, like we did a Walsh project where I think our one bedrooms needed to come down a little bit to be approved, and that amendment was approved. So if there's a way to make I know when we're proposing projects, we want to do it without risk, but if there's some way to, have an ability to adjust or to appeal some of the core development manual criteria, even ever so slightly, that would be helpful. Like a one bedroom at whatever they are, I forget, 600 square feet. If it were like 580 or something, that would still be okay. Just
Awesome.
to kind of loosen up that those requirements a little bit.
Thanks, Stuart. Appreciate that. Thanks to folks who added in fine tuning. We appreciate that. I think if folks feel like we've dealt with this one, we can move to the next one. And again, there's no wrong door. If you wake up tomorrow just mortified that you forgot to mention something, email us. All feedback is welcome feedback. Okay. Can we toggle back to 1.2, Madeline? And as we're reading, if folks want to go ahead and go to the next portion of the poll or prepare the notes that you might want to share, that's totally fine too. So 1.2, the project factory produced housing set aside request does not exceed 10 million. So where we're landing is that we include this as part of the eligibility criteria. Projects cannot request more than 10 million from the set aside. The advisory committee did not seem to have a total consensus on this, but did generally agree that a maximum seemed to be in the range of practical for most. Some folks noted a preference for setting a minimum number of projects to fund instead, while others suggested being open-minded to a broad diversity of projects that are potentially replicable. In general, we heard that we want multiple projects and that the entirety of the funding should not go to a single project. And that seemed to be kind of the big takeaway, with a couple of these nuances on the edge of things.
So I have a question about that. In the manual, I think it says for single family, you can't have fewer than 7 units with the LIFT program. Is that correct? Am I characterizing that correctly?
I'll defer to OHCS on this, or Noah, if folks have an answer top of mind for that.
Can you ask the question one more time?
So is it the case that for single family, you can't have less than 7 units for is that for an acre site? Because I think that's in the manual, and isn't that in the LIFT I've got my team combing this for all of the criteria, minimums, maximums, all of that. So I'm just curious if that's the case.
For home ownership, so for sale units, there's no minimum for a number of homes. For multifamily rental, there is a minimum. Britt or Caroline, do you remember, is it 7 units or is it a different number?
We're looking into it right now and we can get back to the group.
Yeah, we'll respond in the
Okay,
chat.
thank you. Okay.
Thank you for that question, Marge. All right, folks, looks like we're getting folks to participate in the poll around how much this accurately synthesizes the group's feedback. Yeah, Stephanie, go ahead.
I just have a question. I mean, the project could be, are we saying here the project could be a $10 million project? And this process wouldn't fully fund it? Is that in the realm of possibilities? Or I'm just wondering about how many multiple projects we can get in.
My understanding is that no single project could be funded at more than 10 million to make sure that the money is sort of spread across projects. Is that correct, Talia?
Yeah, the project could have a budget larger than 10 million, but just 10 million in lift wouldn't be allocated. More than 10 million in lift wouldn't be allocated to the budget. You'd have to come up with that budget from other sources.
And would there be a consideration that the full request wouldn't be fully funded in this? I mean, by lift is what I'm saying.
Good question. I think we want you to come in with a pro forma that works with the 10 million, rather than one where we come back and ask you to scale it down to meet the 10 million, if I'm interpreting your question correctly.
Got it. Thank you.
So
Stephanie, Stephanie, were you asking if the total project budgets was 10 million, can you ask for 10 million in lift set aside? Was that your question?
No, I was just anticipating, would whoever's making the decision, is there a scenario where you might have asked for 10 million, but you're not going to get the full 10 million?
Oh,
But I think it was answered that they don't want any projects to have to be reduced.
Yeah, I think I interpreted the question differently, but I think your interpretation of my answer is correct, that we want to fully fund projects at the request that they ask for. I think it's going to be like, as we get to this portfolio balancing criteria, I think it's going to be tricky when we're adding up the scores and then we're making sure that all these projects meet our portfolio balancing criteria. There may be situations where we might have to ask for like slight shifts in budget, but our goal will be to get good projects that add up to $25 million. And I know that might be a tough ask.
So on that same note that they brought up regarding the 10 million, so if we present a pro forma that is balanced, I think it will be important for us to highlight that if we get an award, it should be a full award or none.
Thanks, Ernesto. It seemed like this is one where we had probably maybe between 3 and 5 folks who didn't agree that we nailed it. So please write in how we could make sure that it is a more accurate reflection of where the group landed on the VVOX. Yeah, Lucinda, go ahead.
So I was just gonna say, I know it's different on the rental side because of how the ORCA process works, but the lift for home ownership side is concurrent with the NOFA that will soon be released. So it could be potentially just asking if this is possible, that, and certainly I don't have a project this big, but somebody could. You have a project that's 15 million, you ask for 10 million in the set aside and 5 million from standard lift. It could be layered. Can it be layered that way? Or does it have to be your project needs to fit within that 10 million, or don't apply for it under this?
Yeah, I think we're thinking that the project is it's an either or situation. For rental, the 25 million reserved for the factory produced housing and lift is all they have right now. So there's not the option of going into mainstream lift. For home ownership, um, we're thinking kind of similarly. There's such demand for the funds that it's either fully funded with the factory produced housing set aside, and you'll be coming in through the NOFA. So you have the opportunity, if you don't get funded through factory produced housing, to get funded fully through LIFT, but it's one or the other.
So this doesn't mean that we wouldn't be able to qualify for down payment. I mean, to qualify our clients for down payment assistance, right?
Correct. Yeah, this is not related to that source of funding. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. It seems like folks here have kind of falling in a spread in terms of disagreement around 7 million being the cap, or that 10 million there shouldn't be a cap and it should instead be about balancing the amount of projects. So it sounds like there's maybe less alignment than we thought in the original kind of synthesis of where folks were landing, um, which is a totally reasonable bit of feedback. I'm going to move us along because we have, I think, 15 more of these to go. And we want to make sure that we get to all of them.
Emily, it's just worth noting that we tried to add commentary around, this ambitious note about like innovation and a later criteria, so that and we welcome everyone's feedback about whether or not the criteria as a whole, like the entire list, gets to the point that each individual criteria individually couldn't make on their own. But yes, I will move us back to the list. Number 3. This is actually very relevant for number 3 because, as Emily's probably about to say, there wasn't a lot of consensus here either. And so we tried to keep this one vague and define the innovation, ambitious nature of this funding, what it can do for the industry in a later criterion. Go ahead, Emily.
So here again, we're in eligibility, like what gets you even through the gate for consideration. And where we landed on meeting the definition of factory produced housing is that that factory produced housing is an eligibility criteria in the sense that there has to be some aspect of the project that is factory produced, but not specifying a minimum threshold or unit of measurement. Encouraging projects that move beyond panelized parts that are used in site-built construction toward modular, volumetric, or off-site building components in the prioritization criteria so that they are a boost to applicants, not a disqualifier. The advisory committee did not have a clear consensus here on how to define FHP. Again, this is not saying that there are not strong opinions in the advisory committee about what defines it, but just that there was not a group consensus around it. And there were challenges also with finding viable ways to measure the thresholds, even if folks did feel like they had a solid definition. A few key reasons for keeping this inclusive was the lack of consensus on how to define and measure, and concerns voiced about being too prescriptive and complex, and that being an obstacle to folks who could really well warrant consideration otherwise. So the finding here is really that there wasn't a good clear consensus of the group of what factory produced housing means, and how to capture that and measure that as a part of this process. As Madeline mentioned, we're talking about innovation, scalability, replicability, and other components that are important for prioritization down the line that we heard actually is a big component of the discussion of what the definition of factory produced housing was. Okay, I think we can go to, did we capture where the advisory committee landed on this? The consensus is we did not get to consensus, but we did have some really rich feedback that pointed us in some interesting directions around innovation, scalability, environmental impact, and geography. All right. How could we make this more accurate? Oh, I think we jumped ahead
Sorry,
one.
did I move on? Sorry.
Yeah, I think you moved us up a couple of questions. If
I'm sorry. Can
I
you take
can,
us back, Taylor?
yeah, I can reopen it back to 1.3.
Apologies, I got turned around.
There we go. And then let me go back to, there we go.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you both. As folks are filling this out, if folks have feedback about how we could better, if you were in the neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree, how could we better capture the feedback of the group in 4 sentences or less? Or if you've already voted, you can use this time to type up your answer to the next question. All right, looks like we have 20 out of 21, which is about what we've been averaging. Okay, I think we can move to the next one and hear from folks how we could tighten this up. And again, all the variable pieces of feedback that you've already shared about your definition and how you think it should be measured, or the barriers that represented in that, is all captured in the detailed notes, and will be given to NOAA and OHCS. This is how we could more accurately synthesize where the group as a whole landed on this question. If folks want to share out verbally, that's fine too. Yeah, Marta, go ahead.
I'm saying this because there is no gracious way I can think of writing it. I think the curve and the general agreement with 1.3 question, it shows that, there's general consensus, whereas the previous one, and I'll admit I'm one of the voices who's like 10 is way too big. I was the 5 to 7 million voice. Some questions, you're not looking for general agreement, you're looking at what folks radically disagree with or really, really disagree with. So the responses here are, yeah, I guess mostly this works. Whereas I'd encourage OHCS to take another look at the comments reflecting disagreement on the previous one.
Thanks, Marta, noted.
So, when we talk about factory built housing, I thought that it was really clear in the bill that it was really about stimulating the industry in Oregon, and that was one of the goals of the bill. And factory built housing isn't, it's building the product in the factory. And so I think that's really important. As OHCS and NOAA and everyone look at the criteria, because that speaks to scalability and innovation. You're never going to get the speed with stick-built, site-built product that you would get with factory-built housing. So I just wanted to say that, because I thought the bill was really clear about that. And when I have discussed the bill with a number of people, it was, yeah, it's really to help stimulate this industry.
And
So
I 100% agree with Marge on this.
Thanks, everyone. Great comments on camera and in the poll. Very much appreciated. Also seeing that folks wanting, if there is not a clear definition here around eligibility, that there are clear criteria around innovation, scalability, replicability, and other priority components that are in the selection process and not a threshold for application. All right, we have 11 more to go, and a 5 o'clock hard stop. So let's move to the next one, Madeline. Okay, this is readiness and feasibility. So 2.1 is at least one member of the project team has prior experience, at least 2 completed projects building residential housing in Oregon using factory-produced housing components. So where we landed is including a measure of project team experience using factory-produced housing methods. They want to strike a balance between innovation and scalability, but most of all, they want successful projects that are helping to advance the industry, which I think we heard echoed in the comments a moment ago. So success being one of the most important components, and you all being pretty clear that some measure of experience was really critical to success. This is not an area for folks to kind of get their feet wet and explore whether or not they can contribute to this industry. So we got the sense that you had a strong consensus that experience will be critical to success, and some caution that it's an emerging market and we don't want to limit folks unnecessarily. So landing on that in general, at least some team member experience is important. As well as confidence of lenders and in the project, but that not all team members need to have deep experience. So I think we can go to the criteria. All right. How are folks landing? Did we capture this well enough? Okay, we're 19 out of 20, which is about what we've been averaging, with pretty reasonable consensus about agreeing and strongly agreeing in terms of the experience level. I think we can go to the next slide. If you were in the strongly disagree, or neutral category, help us understand how we could get it a little bit better based on where the group as a whole landed.
We're not looking for consensus, are we?
No, we're looking to try as accurately and succinctly as we can capture where kind of the group landed. If that means nope, we had a broad spectrum and we didn't land somewhere, versus actually, yeah, we were pretty clear that in this one, I think we heard that some experience is really necessary for the success of the project, and this isn't a way. Should not be an entry level project for the entire team.
Right.
Helpful. Okay. Definitely want to emphasize that if you had another thought, or you weren't able to type quick enough, put it in the chat, send it to us via email. There's no wrong door, and there's no super hard deadline. We care about, I mean, we will, there's a project hard deadline for us getting this to proposal, but we welcome folks' feedback all along the process. And we also will try to turn this into a survey that lasts beyond the meeting so that folks can continue to weigh in. I think we're, in the interest of time, going to skip 2.2 and hop to the prioritization criteria. Is that right? Great. Okay, so the first of these is 3.1, which is project uses Oregon-based factory or factories for the factory-produced housing components. Where we landed is that we were including this as a prioritization criteria, all applicants getting a boost for using Oregon-based factories, but they're not ineligible if they don't. Generally viewed this as a good prioritization rather than eligibility. It wasn't a minimum threshold, but it was given a boost. That the intent is to support the field in Oregon, But there also is acknowledgement that Oregon factories may not currently have the capacity to fulfill all the potential projects in the desired speed of timeline. So let's see how well we did at capturing the synthesis of the feedback on using Oregon-based factories.
Emily, this is the one where we did the ranking question instead of the like strongly agree, disagree.
Oh, okay. I thought we had a strongly agree or disagree for each of these and then the ranking.
I just have the ranking, but I can put the ranking one up and duplicate or create those live if that's
Yeah, I think that would probably be helpful, Taylor.
okay.
Why don't I can actually read some of these out while you're creating them so that we don't have to go back and read them if that's not ultra confusing for folks.
Sorry, I advanced some of the polls, so you might need to close it, Taylor.
Okay.
All right. We are just to help folks in with like facilitator Vivox speak. We're gonna have the cadence that we've had around how well you agree with the synthesis and then any notes. And then we're gonna actually have folks rank the prioritization criteria in terms of what they think should be the most important so that we're getting feedback from you both on the synthesis and on the relative importance of each of these in your perspective. So this 3.1 is using Oregon-based factory components. 3.2 is project uses Oregon-based development team members. So again, including as a prioritization criteria, getting a boost for using Oregon-based team members, the more the better. We love Oregonians, go Beaver State. But you're not ineligible if you don't. This dovetails with criterion 2.1. The project team has experience with FHP in Oregon, but allows some flexibility for out-of-state development team members to participate. It seemed like there was a strong consensus that the project team should have at least some Oregon-based members, but not all members need to be based in Oregon. Particularly true for teams who are using producers or firms that are close to Oregon boundaries. We heard about Southwest Washington and Idaho for Eastern Oregon in particular.
So my screen is on 4.1. Are we supposed to vote?
Not yet, Marge. Sorry,
Okay.
we're doing hang tight on
Okay.
that. We're doing some live poll tweaking.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Taylor will tell us when she's ready. Madeline, can we scroll down a bit so I can go over all of these and then we can have folks take them one at a time and then also rank them? Thank you. All right, this is probably the meatiest one because we heard that all of these components really matter, and it didn't seem like there was a clear consensus on their relative importance because they all seemed really important. So the project demonstrates that it will advance the factory-produced housing industry by including innovative methods, the use of non-traditional materials, replicability and scalability, and/or significant cost savings. So we heard that that a variety of these things are important. We also heard from folks that sometimes these things are kind of at cross purposes, especially at the degree of development that the field is in right now. So wanted to say that there is a prioritization for projects that include any of these, and again, the more the better, and trying to get at the heart of the legislation, which is to advance the industry, and that this is a criterion for prioritization rather than eligibility. All right, that's probably the meatiest one. We'll get to that in a moment. Thanks for your fast footwork, Taylor. And then 3.4 is that project materials provide energy efficiency, carbon capture, or other environmental benefits. Again, we had this sort of understanding that the industry as a whole provides a lot of those benefits and that this is a prioritization criterion. Applicants getting a boost for using green or sustainable materials, but not ineligible or penalized if they don't. Demonstrating the goal of advancing environmentally friendly factory-produced housing methods in Oregon without being an impractical barrier.
So that leads me to a question about LIFT again. In LIFT, they provide 3 different sustainability criteria. And maybe OHCS, somebody from OHCS can help answer this. Will we be required to do that, to select one of those three? Or will it be embedded into what needs to be met? Or, I mean, I'm just curious because that is a requirement of the LIFT funding. Is that correct? I know one's lead and then there are two other ones.
On the homeownership side, we do not require any specific sustainability criteria. There's like tiebreaker points awarded if you're following a certification in a couple areas. But Britt or Caroline, can you speak to the rental side of things?
We're gonna take a peek and we'll drop in a reply in the chat. Thanks
Okay,
much.
thank you.
And the manual is always the best resource. So if you see it in the manual, you will have to comply with it.
Okay, well, that's where we saw it, was in the manual. The core development piece.
You're talking about the CDM manual, not the LIFT manual itself?
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying on that.
Thanks,
I-
Ellen.
I believe that's correct. So I hope I didn't give you a false adventure there.
Thanks, Marge. Okay.
What is the answer to Marge's question? Because I thought she was asking if LIFT already has environmental sustainability features required. Does the project need both? Need the 3.4 and the LIFT?
Yeah, well, aside from whether the requirements exist, any LIFT requirement, the project must adhere to it outside of this selection. And so these criteria that you see in front of you, wherever they land, that's going to be the like scoring that gets you in to get the LIFT funds, but then you still need to apply for LIFT, and applying for LIFT means that you need to meet all the criteria. I'm not aware that any project needs to meet the LEED like certification, so that would surprise me, but we will follow up with that information for sure.
Yeah, there were three different ones, I think, that you could select or that would be selected for you or something.
I have a question where it comes to responding to these after that overview of 3.1 through 3.4. It still seems like we're kind of responding to them generally, but we don't have a mechanism to say which criteria feels way more important than another. It sounds like there will be some ranking later, but
yes,
I guess I'm struggling to wrap my brain around that weighting aspect of these different criteria. When we say agree or disagree or whatever.
Yeah. Thanks, Nate. I appreciate it. So we're going to take each one in turn just as we have. Did we get the synthesis right? Does this accurately reflect where the group landed in your experience? And then how can we get it better if you don't think we got the synthesis to where it needed to be on each one individually, separate from their relationship to one another? And then we're going to ask folks to rank them in their relative importance, so that we can we're getting feedback, like general feedback on each one, and then we're looking at the rating.
Okay.
So hang tight. We'll get to the rating, which is going to be just thrilling in a minute.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So the one that we wrote about in terms of project using factory, Oregon-based factories for components. So this is a boost. There's general consensus around this being a good thing, but not a mandatory thing. Does that capture where folks landed?
I have a question. So if you go back to the previous question, what? Okay. Yeah. So most people are responding either agree or strongly agree. So how are we going to depict or portray I put neutral because I do believe that there has to be room for something else if there's nothing in Oregon. Like you said before, especially never in the States.
Mm-hmm. So because this committee is charged with an advisory function, we actually don't have to land on consensus. We're just trying to give the best possible synthesis of where people, the range of where people were landing, so that OHCS can make as informed a set of decisions as possible. So we're using this to refine the synthesis that we sent out, which was very much our first draft. Any Brene Brown likes to say a effing first draft. This was very much a first draft, and we're asking you all to come alongside us and help us make it better. And then we will also be sending out what ends up being like our next draft of it for asynchronous review. So folks can pop in and be like, hey, I really think you missed this, or I heard this in the group. And we're going to do our absolute best. And the charge was advisory, which is to share your brilliance, not necessarily to come to a decision. That is OHCS's unenviable task.
Okay. Thank you, Emily.
So I strongly disagree on this. This is a state of Oregon program, and I think there's plenty of capacity in our state to manufacture. And with all due respect to our friends in Idaho, I think this should be for Oregon-based manufacturers.
Thanks, Stuart. Okay,
I agree with Stuart. The only exception would be if there's something that is not here in my book.
Say that again, Ernesto, please.
I do agree with Stuart. I think that the only exception would be if the resources are not existing in Oregon for now.
I agree with Stuart. I think we do have the capacity.
And I believe the intent of this set aside was to help increase the capacity within Oregon to produce factory-built housing.
I also agree that Oregon should have the capacity to build for this project.
Thanks, everybody. I think we can go to the next slide, and folks can drop that feedback here in the poll. I'll ask folks to remember that your brilliance and opinions are so important, and we have captured the nuance of those. And we're asking folks to agree or disagree with the synthesis of where the group landed. So it seemed from what we gathered that folks wanted absolutely an emphasis on Oregon factories, but that overall it was better not to totally eliminate factories from other places in case there were considerations around geography, around capacity, around the development team. If that does not match your personal opinion, share it for sure. But if you feel like that does not capture where the group landed, that's really where we're really hoping for feedback. Does that capture where the group landed? I'm seeing that folks responded, but not seeing responses. Is that something that's a technical piece? Or are folks just not, not putting things? There we go. Helpful.
My bad.
I was like, I see
Click show results. I could see it on my own screen up here, so I thought it was showing.
Real. Yes. Okay. I think we're seeing a lot here that unless there's a really good reason not to use an Oregon-based factory, that the heavy priority should be on Oregon-based factories. I wonder if that's an important nuance to capture, that it's not just your run-of-the-mill prioritization like a boost. It is absolutely the intent, and that it should be deviated from only under particular circumstances where there's not an alternative.
I hope somebody takes a screenshot of this because I'm seeing consensus in the comments that just populated.
Yeah, I agree, Marcia.
That meets Oregon's requirements. We'll have to agree. That was supposed to be a joke, by the way.
Ernesto, bringing the jokes.
Yes, I'm not that funny, so you guys know.
Little housing joke on a Tuesday
Yeah.
afternoon.
Emily or Talia, would you be able to say what the change would be as a result of this? Is this changing from prioritization to an eligibility criteria, or are we changing the word components to manufacturers? What is the change that's emerging?
I might be wrong, but I'm seeing it emerge as it's not just like a boost. It's not just like a nice to have. You get a bump if you're in Oregon. Like that is the intent. Like that is very much the intent of the projects, and there should be deviation for it only if there's a very good reason. Like it's 400 miles away in Idaho, or Oregon. All the Oregon producers said, sorry, we already got our folks and we're at capacity. Like there's a really good reason to deviate from Oregon factories as opposed to just a sort of a general boost. It sounds like it's something kind of in between eligibility and prioritization, if I'm reading it right, or it's a very heavy prioritization for Oregon factories.
Yeah, so maybe that comes in with the weighting of this factor. If we don't want it to become an eligibility criteria, then it's still a prioritization criteria, but it's heavily, heavily weighted. Or we flip it and it's not just, oh, you get a boost, but we expect you to be Oregon based unless other circumstances apply. Nate, you came off mute.
I think that's what I was trying to get at with my earlier comment about all four of these items is that weighting, like if they're not going to be eligibility criteria, then we need to be able to say what the emphasis is, like how critical that is, Yeah.
Yeah, helpful, Nate. I definitely hear a new consensus emerging around this that it is a deep prioritization, not a nice to have Oregon-based factories. Okay. I'm mindful of our time. I think we can move to the next one.
The next poll, correct?
Yes, the next poll. Okay, if folks remember, this is project uses Oregon-based development team members. The idea here is that we are prioritizing Oregon-based team members, at least one or more, but that it is not a complete barrier to entry if your entire team is not from Oregon. Looks like we have a little more general consensus here. There's a boost and an emphasis, but it's not an eligibility criteria. Can we get to 20? Can we get to 20 out of 21? All right, I think get those last votes in and we'll move to the next one where folks give feedback on, did we synthesize this? If not, tell us how we could better capture where the group landed. Folks are welcome to come off mute if you'd like to share your comment verbally as well. Any ways we could make this more reflective of the group's sentiment? Give folks about 30 more seconds to get in how we could make this more accurate in terms of where the group landed and what the group feedback was. All right. Thank you, everyone. It does seem like we have a strong Oregon emphasis on both of these, and that is an important factor for prioritization, but not necessarily the end all be all for eligibility. Okay, let's go to the next one. So 3.3. Imagine there's going to be quite a bit of discussion here. This is where we decided to put our emphasis, as opposed to sort of rigidly defining factory produced housing and how to measure it. Instead, having more of a kind of a global benchmark around innovative methods, non-traditional materials, replicability and scalability, or significant cost savings. That some measure of these or some measures of these in combination should be evidence to be driving the industry and the field and Oregon's ability to make significant strides in this space forward. Understanding that some of these metrics are kind of at cross purposes with one another. And so it would be very difficult for a single project to hit all four of them. I think this was our best attempt to capture that there is a spirit of the bill here that is deeply about factory produced housing and about driving the field forward, but that also being very rigid or prescriptive about what does or doesn't constitute it, especially with an emerging field, could box some really interesting projects out that could potentially have a contribution, but might not meet sort of the letter of the law as defined if in an eligibility criteria. All right, we have 19 out of 21. Speak now. Cast your vote. It's like get out the vote for VVox.
We better get out the vote this year because seriously.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Want to knock doors together, Ernesto?
I would love to join you, Emily.
Let's do it.
We're gonna need it.
Okay. I think we can go to the next screen. We are going to give folks a chunk of time on this next screen since this is such a meaty criteria and such an important part of our discussion over the last several meetings. So so please put in your thoughts. Again, how well does this capture where the group landed? Not necessarily your personal feedback, but where did the group land? And does this capture it? And if it doesn't, give us the 1 or 2 sentences that we could do to change it to make it more accurately capture the group. If folks want to come off mute and share their comments in discussion, that's great as well. Helpful. These are really helpful. Please continue to put your thoughts in. Folks still writing? Talia, while we're doing this, I'm seeing here that separating these out is a request. I wonder, while we're doing this, could you add in another poll within this to have people rank these in prioritization? If that's too much to ask on the fly, I get it.
Let's see. I might have to create like a separate ranking, or let me
Yes. Yeah, please do, because I feel like as a lump, it's in the original one, right? Like it's in the mix of the rest of them, but within the sort of like advancing the field, let's see if there's a clear winner in terms of these individual components. So we'll have two separate ranking questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome. Okay. Anybody need more time for adding to feedback on 3.3?
Someone is suggesting including the environmental sustainability and energy efficiency, but that is somewhat part of 3.4.
That's
So I
the
just wanted
next
to
one.
call that
Yeah.
out.
Yep. Okay. I think we can move to the next one and then we'll get into ranking. I want to make sure that that OHCS has time to talk about some of the tactical pieces from here and that folks have a chance to give feedback on the proposal and application process. Okay, so this one is about sustainability, green climate impact. The project's materials provide energy efficiency, carbon capture, other environmental benefits. So the committee landed that this was great, and certainly a measure of prioritization, not eligibility, but not the defining feature of prioritization. And we'll get into the ranking of that in a moment. So far, it seems that folks are mostly neutral to agree, with one or two folks in disagree. I think that might be all the folks that are going to answer. So let's go to the next one and let's see how could we have better captured this at the synthesis of the group. I know everybody's really stoked for the ranking. Just get through this one. Then we can get to the real sizzle reel, ranking all of these prioritization criteria. Okay. As yet, it seems kind of like folks are like, yeah, that's reasonable. It's a component that is great to have, but it's not like absolutely core or a factor for eligibility.
Should I go ahead and pull up the next poll, or okay?
Yeah, let's go for it. Let's move to ranking. Okay, y'all, the moment we've been waiting for. We're gonna do this to Nate's question. We're actually gonna do these in two parts. This is the criteria the overall prioritization criteria that were in the memo, please rank them according to which do you think are the most important. Within there is the sort of advancing the industry, and we're going to drill down into that in a moment. But right now, this is as written, it's in that kind of grouping of advancing the industry. Right. This is kind of like, did anybody go to like Circus or like cheap carnival games where you have to shoot the little water into the clown's mouth and then your little horse goes or your little balloon fills or whatever? It's kind of like watching that. We're gonna play some skee ball later. Oh, advancing the industry just took the lead. Oh no, factory produced housing's coming in hot.
These sound like horse names.
I know, right?
Factory produced housing.
Them all be horse names. Factory produced housing. I would bet on factory produced housing as a horse. Secretariat.
I think we just started Nerd Weekend at the horse track.
Yeah, I know. They're like, who named these horses? Are these housing nerds? These economists? Oh man, it's a real horse race between advancing the industry and Oregon-based factories. Whoo! Come on, get your votes in, everybody. All right, all right. 19. Oh my gosh. What's gonna happen? If you haven't voted, get your vote in because it might matter for advancing the industry versus Oregon-based factory. All right, this is actually super helpful, everybody. Thank you very much. Sometimes Madeline and Taylor and I just work with economists all day long, and they're all about forced choices, which sometimes is not pleasant as a mental experiment, but it can be really illustrative when we get to moments like this where we do have to do some hard prioritization. Okay, I think we've gotten where we need to go with this one. It looks like Oregon-based factories is the top priority. Advancing the industry is shortly after. Oregon-based development team members after that, geographic distribution after that, and carbon efficiency and environmental benefits after that. All right. And now in terms of, we're going to dive deeper into advancing the industry. So let's rank these: the innovative methods, or innovation, the use of non-traditional materials, such as mass timber, demonstrating replicability and scalability, or demonstrating significant cost savings. What are our priorities within this? Okay, replicability and scalability taking the early lead. Ooh, savings and innovative methods battling it out. All right. It looks like you all agree with yourselves in the comments, which is so nice when there is tremendous consistency. It seems like replicability and scalability is of premium importance, followed by cost savings and innovative methods, and use of non-traditional materials is important, but sort of farther back on the value chain. All right, this is incredibly helpful. Please get in the rest of your votes if you haven't voted already. And Madeline, how many did we have left if we dip into portfolio balancing? I think it might be time to move on, but
There's only 3.
Okay. Remind me what they are again. Can you toggle to them?
Yeah. Minimum of 2 projects, no more than 5.
Oh, right.
Homeownership rental, 3 funded projects per manufacturer, and 2 funded projects per sponsor.
Okay. I think we can allow folks to chime in on those asynchronously since it's a lot about sort of number of projects and sort of portfolio balancing. So this isn't going to box anybody out from applying. It's just how OHCS thinks about putting together the final package. And I do want to make sure that OHCS can get into the details of what the application and proposal process looks like. So let's stop sharing for a moment, Madeline, and just wrap up this piece of it, and then I'll turn it over to the OHCS team. Thank you all for participating in the live polling. I think we had some areas where it seemed like we captured the synthesis well, and other areas where we didn't, and the feedback was incredibly helpful. Also deeply helpful to see that how important that sort of field advancing component is, and the prioritization within that, leaning pretty heavily towards scalability and replicability. Really appreciate the drill down there. We are going to take this and make our first draft as much better based on y'all's feedback, and then we will turn around a new version of it that is for your asynchronous feedback, so that we can make sure that we're gathering it, and that will be before we deliver the final product to NOAA and to OHCS to inform the process from here. Speaking of the process from here, would the team at OHCS like to pull up their slides and talk a little bit about the tactical pieces, and then hopefully in our last probably 10 minutes, we can field questions and hear y'all's feedback on the actual application process, separate from all the selection criteria and metrics and eligibility that we've spent the last several meetings going over. I'll turn it over to you, Talia.
Great. And Madeline, were you going to share slides? Cool. Great. Thank you. So none of this will be completely new to anybody, but I just wanted to remind folks of what our process will look like after this point. Let's see. Oh, actually, first we're going to go to the 9% update. So I'll pass it to Caroline.
Thanks, Talia. Hey, everybody. Just taking some space to elevate the 9% low-income housing tax credit update. This application or interest form did open last week on the 14th, and this will be open until February 25th. So it is an open and closed situation. It is potentially compatible with factory produced housing set aside. We really encourage folks to get connected with technical advisors and use OHCS resources that we've already got posted on our website. Some of them are linked here in the slides. I'll also drop it in the chat, and just wanting to elevate and remind folks that this is open and available for application right now. Thanks, Talia.
Thanks, Caroline. Great. So here's a reminder of the process. After this meeting today, behind the scenes, NOAA will be working to submit recommendations to us based on all of your feedback of what criteria we should include in our factory produce housing project selection form. And we'll take those recommendations. They'll go through some internal processing. We'll have to get them approved inside of OHCS, outside of OHCS, and then once they've gone through all those pathways, our goal is to launch the factory produce housing project selection form at the end of February. So no specific date yet, but be on the lookout for that. The project selection form will close, depending on the timing, March, April, and then our goal is to announce the project selections by early May. Go to the next slide. So just a little bit more detail, the project selection form will be an online form where our goal is to make it relatively easy to fill out. It won't be as involved as filling out an application for LIFT, for those of you who have been through that before. Our plan is to leave it open for 30 days. And we really encourage you, especially on the homeownership side, to do the NOFA process concurrently so that you have access to either the FPH funds or our LIFT funds, regardless of whether you get selected. So, we encourage you to proceed anything with ORCA or NOFA as applicable to your project. And just a reminder that the projects must pencil with available resources for homeownership. That's LIFT. There's a small pre-development loan available with our NOFA for very specific projects like limited equity co-ops. We also have Oregon Affordable Housing Tax Credits. But it's really just those main two resources. And then for rental, it's LIFT, the 9% if you qualify, and Oregon Affordable Housing Tax Credit. So just, making sure that your projects pencil, you have the idea of what the resources shored up and are ready to apply. So that's just really quick what the process will look like. And we'll be doing TAs. We'll announce when it's coming, the date that it's coming out. We'll do an announcement when it's live. We'll host an info session about the forum to walk people through it. So there will be more elevation of it when the time comes. So this won't be the last that you're hearing about the selection form and the criteria. That's all on our end.
Thank you, Talia. Quick question. So for the homeownership portion of this project, I assume this is something that just came to mind, so basic that I didn't remember. I assume that we should be able to apply some financing as part of the stack, right? In order for us to work this price out, because these houses will be sold, therefore, there will be some income within those sales. And I assume that we also should be able to qualify for a developer fee in the rental portion of it and the sale part of it, right?
Yeah, I think just having your funding stack worked out before you apply is important. But yes, you can apply the sales revenue as long as you have the cash flow available to make the development and of things work. And yes, both programs have a developer fee maximum. So we won't be asking super in depth about your pro forma, but just making sure that you have those resources identified.
Okay. And the pro forma, I'm sorry to ask this again. And the pro forma for this particular exercise, will that be a standardized pro forma, or are we going to be making our own?
Likely a standardized, simplified pro forma. Yeah, good question. I don't think we've completely finalized what that will look like.
Okay, but you guys are going to be providing that.
Yeah.
Both for rental and homeownership. So 2 pro formas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Talia, projects must pencil if a project is going to get a commercial bank loan, would a letter from that lender, where do you draw the line there?
Yeah, TBD, I don't even know if we'll be looking to that amount of detail, just how
Okay.
much you plan on bringing in debt, a loan
Okay.
versus other resources.
Okay. Thanks.
Marta, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just was wondering whether this is compatible with Oregon's vertical housing incentive program, because I know that's still very much active, at least until 2031. And then can communities that go for MERL, Moderate Income Revolving Loan Fund, can those projects also be considered? It's kind of like the prioritization criteria, but we didn't discuss it because we had other very, very key things to discuss. But how we're going to prioritize those that are tapping into those incentives, those loan funds, urban renewal funding, right? There is no match requirement, but it must pencil. But how do we prioritize collaboration? Like indicating that compatibility with multiple programs could be beneficial to encourage collaboration.
Yeah, great question. And MERL plays well with LIFT. So if your jurisdiction has adopted a council ordinance for MERL, then that would work. I guess other OHCS folks on the line, I'm not familiar with the vertical housing incentive. Does anybody know about that?
No, this is Britt. No, but Marta, your other question about Merle, yes, that would work well on the multifamily side as well. But is the vertical incentive you're talking about, is that a local initiative or is that a statewide initiative?
It's a statewide opportunity that communities opt into.
And where do they access that resource or that
Is it
opportunity?
the vertical housing development zone, the VHDZ? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sorry to sound like a broken record. I think for really specific questions like that, our technical advisory team is the best and most accurate folks to check in on that.
Gotcha. Yeah, just making sure our language does not preclude collaboration like that. That's all. And layering and stacking of local incentives. Perhaps just calling it out like local incentives, could be good.
You guys might have noticed we took out the leveraging other funds criteria. That was a direct feedback from the group. So what we didn't discuss today was what was not on the screen or what we omitted per your feedback, because there was already a lot of criteria to consider. But it might be worth taking a look at the original lists that we had sent out in prior meeting packets and comparing it to this final list. And obviously this wasn't final, this was draft. And so what will end up in the final list as well. But yeah, Marta, there is no requirement to leverage other funds, and there is no preclusion from leveraging from dipping into other pots of funding.
Thanks.
I'm a little confused about, maybe I didn't hear this correctly, but did I hear that the pro forma isn't really being scrutinized in these applications?
A little bit of that, Margie.
For your lift application, you're going to go through a really detailed due diligence of your pro forma. For this application, we'll probably be requiring a simplified pro forma to make sure you have your sources identified and like broad categories of uses estimated. But we won't be doing the like really tight due diligence that we do in the underwriting of Lyft.
Okay, got it. So this is really kind of the initial clearinghouse, and then it goes into the Lyft process, which is really going to be the piece that you've got to really dot the I's and cross the T's.
Exactly. That's a
Got
great
it.
way of putting it.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you.
Appreciate all these questions. Along with further questions, we'd also like to open the floor for just feedback about the application process, about proposals, about things that have worked really well in the past, things that you'd like to see improvement on. It doesn't necessarily have to be totally within OHCS. Ways that if you all have run, if you've run your own proposal process or your own bidding process, things that have been helpful for you in this field in particular. Would just love folks' collective wisdom on the logistics of the application process and proposal process itself.
Could I just say, I think a lot of applicants are doing this on their own dime, and I'd appreciate it if these applications are as simple as possible.
I don't know if that wish will come true, Stuart. This is the state.
We can wish, we can continue to give that feedback. Stuart, have you seen something that, you feel like looks like is really what good looks like, that, meets the, let's say, the sort of fiduciary and like taxpayer rigor, but also is a fairly simplified application? Is there a good example out there, or are we mostly looking at lousy examples?
I haven't seen a great example, but just know that we're doing this gratis and not at risk, and so the less time we spend on a lot of the minutia, the better. It'd be really appreciated.
Noted for sure. Other thoughts, big or small, on application process, proposal process?
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, we've kind of gotten to it with like trying to prioritize these criteria, but I think it should just be pretty legible to applicants, like what's going to give them a good chance, what isn't, right? Like what's going to make a strong application so that it's not wasting anybody's time and effort. So yeah, I think just making sure there's really, really good legibility about what's going to, yeah, what's going to be prioritized and winning for projects.
That's helpful, Nate. So in addition to the actual application itself, making it real clear, like this is what good looks like. This is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, and that way, hopefully, people won't waste their time or OHCSs with applications that just don't line up very well.
Heard. Helpful.
How will this application, so you're filling out multiple applications, this application and then the lift application. How does this application fold into the lift application, or does it? Is it just two separate things?
Two separate things. So, we advise you to be doing those processes concurrently. There is going to be some overlap in terms of questions asked, where you can just copy and paste something that you may have already submitted for one, and that's totally acceptable. But for rental, if you're not already in the ORCA, well, I'll just step back. Yeah, they're just separate processes, maybe with some overlap.
Is there a qualifying period to get in the ORCA sphere? Or, I mean, is that something that you have to like, should somebody start doing that right now so that you're in the state database or whatever? Okay.
Yeah, the ORCA is on a readiness model, so it's open all the time, but it just depends on when we get funding, and then we can push it out to the projects.
Caroline, do you want to maybe share the link to the readiness, the first step of the ORCA?
I dropped a link to the OHCS ORCA webpage in our big group chat already, and there's a ton of resources on there. You can poke around the process, see how readiness comes into play, and then, of course, our lovely technical advisors can probably recite everything ORCA back to you. So I'd really encourage, if folks have questions on the multifamily rental side, to reach out to them.
And in this process, is there a greater weight given to home ownership versus rental?
Nope.
No.
Yeah, just that we are going to, in that portfolio balancing, we're going to aim to have at least one home ownership and at least one rental.
Got it. Thank you.
I see a question in the chat here that said, could a primer developer include a plan that uses more than one manufacturer for a single project? I don't recall anything in portfolio balancing or eligibility or otherwise that would preclude that. Is that right, team?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't think there's anything that precludes that.
One thing just to maybe voice is like, I mean, it's hard to know, but just trying to get the vibe of people who are interested in applying for this, right? And it feels like there's certainly more uncertainty around this one than previous lift applications because people haven't seen it before, right? This is a whole new realm, and folks who might have a really tiny project might feel like, do I have a shot at this, or like a really, like just, or are there going to be like too many projects from the city of Portland and it's not worth my time? Like they're going to look to balance this out. Like, is there any mechanism or way like a pre-survey or anything that might help allow people to have a little more visibility into that kind of thing? And would that be helpful? I don't know. It's kind of a question.
I think that's helpful, Nate. So you're asking like, is there some kind of rubric, or I don't know, I'm thinking of like a BuzzFeed quiz being like a
Yeah.
Cosmo quiz from being like, how likely are you to like get your crush? Whatever. But more like, do I have a reasonable shot here to Stuart and others' point that this is
Right.
a heavy lift, no pun intended, to apply,
Right.
and you want to know if you're in the running.
Yeah, and people know there's no other lift funding right now, and there's only 5 slots to get. So like, it's a pretty weird thing for people to, I think, kind of gear up for. So
Yeah, I'd love to know what other people think. We hadn't thought about doing an interest survey, but we could.
Talia, have there been processes where there's sort of a letter of interest or like a pre-application where folks can get a sense of, oh, this seems like a pretty far shot because you're an Idaho-based manufactured home producer or what have you, like, or is that out of the realm of possibility for a OHCS process?
Yeah, we've done pre-applications and posted them publicly. I think we weren't thinking about doing that for this because we're not thinking of it as a huge application process. We're trying to keep it simple and as low touch as possible. So having multiple steps feels like it is adding to the work that we're asking you all to do, even if it's just a couple of questions. But if people think that they need that information to determine if they're going to apply, we're not opposed to that. To some of the comments in the chat, we'll definitely be doing a webinar about, or an info session once it goes live. And we will keep an FAQ document up on our site.
Awesome. Also, if folks have angles into helping spread the word to folks that aren't involved in the committee or may not, be, eagerly watching the OHCS application website, how we can spread the word just to the field more broadly, not only for the application process, but also just for the TA and the community building and the field building and the connectivity. Wanting to know how OHCS can support that through this process, because that is a part of the bill, and the intention in the funding is that it will help coalesce and support the field going forward, even over and above those who are selected for the actual projects. Do I have that right, Talia?
Talia, is this kind of a pilot project because it's a fairly small funding amount for such a needed thing, housing? Is it kind of a pilot project in that if this goes over really well, potentially the state will, kind of look at this and, there could be 50 million next year or something. I'm throwing numbers out there that probably don't make sense, but because there's a certain amount of affordable housing that, the state is wanting to achieve in these geographic areas.
Yeah, I think, and Bill, I can be short and maybe give you a little airtime too. I think this is meant to really elevate the promise of factory produced housing. And the part 2 of this work group will be, one of the mandates is talking about potential other financing or resources to keep proliferating this work in the field and the demand. So I think that is the complete intention behind the bill. Bill, do you want to speak a little bit more about the
I don't think there's too much more to add, to be honest. You did a nice job clarifying. Now, I think the original bill did request a larger allocation for this purpose, and it was carved back due to various different legislative processes. But we will be looking at ways to sort of institutionalize this. This work group will, and make that recommendation out in, I guess it'll probably be the final report. So that it has a lasting impact and isn't just a one and done funding opportunity. But again, that's what we'll get into as our work group in phase 2. That'll be a part of that work that happens.
Helpful questions and feedback. This is a good time if you have some final thoughts around application process or timeline or proposal for OHCS and for NOAA to voice it. And then we will move into wrapping up this sprint part of the process. Folks have final thoughts that they'd like to share? Well, hopefully that means that we've done an excellent job gathering your thoughts over the course of the last 10 hours that we've spent together. It's been a joy to have you all here. I am so delighted that this is a catch your breath intermediate goodbye and not a long-term permanent goodbye. We will be reconvening to hear about how the process is going, what the applicants look like, what the selected projects are all about, and how we can come together as a work group and create a meaningful and supportive TA process, not only for the selected projects, but for the field at large. Again, the intent of this is definitely to have projects and get money into the field, spur that innovation and that field advancement, but also to come together as a field, learn from one another, and have a lot of sort of like ongoing richness and dialogue. I think this group has been incredibly informative to NOAA and to OHCS just in the past month, and we look forward to continuing that dialogue as we move along. We'll be in communication about what scheduling looks like, what the cadence of those meetings looks like, and in the immediate short term, we'll be in communication with an opportunity for asynchronous feedback on the kind of the next iteration of the draft of synthesis of the advisory committee's feedback for everybody. I'll see if Bill, Talia, anybody else wants to voice some final thoughts and some gratitude for this terrific group.
Yeah, just exactly. I want to say thanks to everybody for committing so much time on short notice in a very compressed period of time over the holidays. So thank you so much for helping us put this together. I think we're just much better informed because of the process, and both Oregon Housing and NOAA, I think, have come away with a lot from these conversations. We also know where to find you when we want more. And then I just want to also, I think I'll say, and Talia, you and I can maybe talk about this, but I was I mentioned recommendations for funding at the final report. That final report isn't due until June of 27, I don't believe. Personally, I would like us to have a recommendation maybe by June of this year to hopefully inform the 2027 long session for another ask, so we don't have to wait for 3 years to have another bite at the apple. So I just want to put that out there. Hopefully we can maybe put that on the front end of the TA pieces to kind of talk a little bit about that. So with that, I'll sign off. Thanks.
Yeah, I echo everyone. This group has been so generous with your feedback and time. And if you feel like plugging into this anymore in the last couple days, we'd love any additional thoughts on how we should evaluate replicability, scalability, innovation methods. You've already given a lot of input on that, but just any kind of thoughts that help us evaluate that when the rubber hits the road. But yeah, we're really looking forward to the part 2 of this work and continuing this work together and learning more about factory produced housing. And thanks for being such leaders in this field.
Thank you to everybody. It's been really enlightening for me. I've learned a lot. So I really appreciate everyone's generous time and, educating me for sure. But this whole process has been interesting.
Thanks, Marge. Yes, we are a loving group of public service nerds, and you all have met us with that intention to honor affordable housing, our communities in Oregon, all the various parts that are going into this. You could feel the goodwill from this group. Thank you for your dedication. Look for some communication from us in the short term and going forward. No wrong door with any amount of feedback. Anything else you want to note, email it to any of us. It'll all get put back into the pile of richness that you all have delivered to us over the last several weeks. So I think with that, Madeline, if there's no more housekeeping, we can let people go on about their evening.
I don't think so. Thank you all.
Thanks so much,
Thank you all
everybody.
so much. We'll see you
Thank
soon.
you.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you.
Good work. Guys fit it all in the time we had. Bye,
Bye,
Stephanie.
Stephanie. Oh, yeah, I think